many times. I should have been on it. Sorry about that. So well, yeah, the idea, you talk about like history,
Hmm.
and there's a really interesting one about that's called the medieval period, like double,
Yes.
triple meanings, right?
Hmm.
And it's clearly like on the left is more of like the factual, and then the right is very like short, but it's like, on the rag. It's
Hmm.
almost like in parentheses, like what's the term? Just like a side, like a thought on the side, about
Yeah.
okay, certain things happen, right? So maybe that's where perfume came from. And just
Hmm.
this idea of like, obviously there's a historical precedent for menstruation, and just like how much it's affected even today, like our language, right?
Definitely. And that one I really thought of like theater, speaking of Shakespeare,
Mm,
and those little like side conversations that they'll
yes,
have where like there'll
exactly.
be a conversation and there'll be a side character who's like, "La, la, la, la." Shakespeare really loved doing this.
Uh-huh.
Damn it, he's one of my influences.
Yeah. But I mean, there's
So
so
I,
many
I
like,
thought about
I'm sorry.
that.
I'm sorry, go
But
ahead.
it was also, they were meant to function. There's one, especially there's this one paragraph and this one stanza in there that functions almost as like a mini poem within this greater poem about like the apple and the tree, and we have to bother someone else with our leftover sediment. And
Right.
um, but yeah, because as part of this, I had to kind of research some things.
Hmm.
Even though I go through periods, it's like, well, I don't know everything. And if I want to write about something greater than myself and other things and expand beyond myself, I have to do some research.
Yeah.
I decided to look up historically. I was like, well, what did we do before the always pad? Some
Right.
pretty troubling things. I mean, a lot of like in Egypt, they did like sticks with papyrus wrapped around them and used them as like a
Oh,
ancient tampon, which sounds very uncomfortable, but
yeah. Oh my
there
God.
was a lot that was pretty brutal, very but
Huh.
inventive. But yeah, when I was looking at the medieval, what they used to do in the medieval times, it was, yeah, we're just bleed. I was like, well,
Hmm.
okay.
That's always an
Not a lot
option,
of
right?
options. Yeah.
Oh,
But
jeez.
yeah, mostly rags. Yeah. At least in Europe.
Well, I do have to say, it does seem like period lends itself to so many like double meanings, right?
Oh yeah.
You have the patient period, you
Oh, the.
have the retail period. The retail
Mhm.
period was one really interesting one. It was like, the gall, so to speak, of this woman. She got like a hot pack, and she's clearly going through time of the month, and it's like, she's quote openly being a woman, she's openly having a body, and like a lot of things you've already talked about, right, where males are free to have a body, to be
Yeah.
open about it. And I was just so struck, like even with like the first blood is the name of one of the poems, and it's
Oh
obviously
yeah.
right. And just the idea of like, don't mention it, and just you talk about history, like just this quote unquote surprise being passed from generation to generation, and kind of
Hmm.
like, for what, like, I mean, was it, for you, was it like a total surprise?
It was. Yeah, I had no idea because that was exactly what happened. I came home, I was 11. Was
Mm-hmm.
I 11? Yeah, I was 11. And, at that age, I was still like playing on the playground and still like very much a child. And I come home and I go to use the restroom, and oh my God, there's all this blood. Which is like, by the way, how did I not notice that there was all this blood? I don't
Uh,
know. Kids, total unawareness
sure.
of this part of my body, because really outside from like going to pee, it's not like a part of my body I had really interacted with much prior. It's not something I really like looked at or like even had any awareness of. I was just a
Hmm.
kid, and then all of a sudden it's bleeding. I have to do some kind of maintenance for it once a month, and I had no idea.
Hmm.
But yeah, I really thought I had some kind of serious injury, but I wasn't in pain, and I was just very confused. And so I was like, Mom.
Rightfully so, yeah.
And she was like, oh no, it's just this. And I was like, well, why didn't you tell me?
Mm,
So it wasn't traumatic, but it was just like, what the fuck just
yeah,
happened?
yeah, 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 yeah.
But then I also playfully am like, what the hell, Mom? You had another kid that went through this. Why didn't you there was no setup.
Huh.
There was no setup, so it was a setup.
Right. Hey. The
Obviously I don't blame her now. It's just, it's one of those things, especially previous generations where they're like, we don't want to do it.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's changing?
I think so. Yeah. I see a lot of millennial parents in particular are a lot more open with their kids about
Hmm.
more just like honesty about a lot of subjects, and just saying like, here's more of what's going on, instead of more of a like, don't worry, child.
Mm,
So I do think it's changing, and I think more people are speaking up about a multitude of lived experiences, but I think also when it comes to menstruation, people are talking about it more.
yeah.
You see more advertisement for products beyond just
Hmm.
the Always pads and Tampax.
Okay.
Tampax Pearl. Those were kind of your options back in the day, and now there are more options for how to even take care of your period. We have disposable underwear. There's period underwear that is reusable, rewashable. There's the menstrual cup, which was not around when I was a kid.
Mm,
Um, so there's like multiple ways to manage it too. So with new products comes new advertisements, comes new conversations. And
that makes sense.
so I think it is changing, thankfully.
I've been really happy to see like a lot of my students, like they'll do like a senior project or like,
Mhm.
community service type of thing. I mean, I hate using that term, but like, and a lot of it is, is taking care of like period products and menstrual products for like for women, like unhoused women.
Mhm.
I mean, you got to imagine like, ideas of dignity and just like, it happens
Yeah.
on the street just like it happens in a home.
Well, and this didn't make it in the book because I didn't know how to write about it. But in prisons, they only get so
Mm,
much money to spend on what they need. And oftentimes there's not enough like pads, etc. So they'll bleed through and get it on their uniform. And if your uniform's messed up, they'll extend your time.
God dang.
So often it just
Right.
it's really fucked up.
Right.
Very upsetting. But yeah, if you can't afford, or they don't give you enough products to manage it, and because
Hmm.
periods experiences ranges so much for so many people, you know everything issued by a state is so like everyone has to get the same, but it's not actual equity. It's
Right.
for the girls who are bleeding more, they end up having more time because their uniform gets blood on it.
Man, I've read about, articles where it's like, okay, so and so, got in a fight and his sentence, his time is, extended, but like I've never read about it like that. Like I wonder how they would
Yeah.
even couch that in an article. And it's like, wow, that's seems to be just an obvious
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
It's, people talk about like, oh, that the time of the month, like what your
Mhm.
book does is your collection does, it talks a lot about like the totality of, right? It's
Mhm.
not just, talk about like spotting and, it's
Mhm.
not just these, whatever, 3 days, 6 days, 8 days, like it, you do one of the poems is 13 years of blood loss.
Mhm.
You do the math, like this is, how many milliliters lost.
Mhm.
Um, and then even like in tampon bondage, right? I mean, the line
Yeah.
about, I mean, it's almost like a dominatrix or something like that, right? It's like, tell me good girls don't complain.
Yeah.
Who's like the villain in that? Is it this big society with a capital S? Is it patriarchy? Is it?
I mean, throughout the book, it's there's not a clear villain necessarily,
Yeah, yeah.
but definitely the period itself is also kind of a villain in
Hmm.
how restricting it can be, how painful it can be, but also mostly society TM and how we treat people who menstruate, how we
Society.
treat people who don't. Society TM.
I like that.
Yes. um, so a bit of both, but men are actually not really the villain. If you read through the book and you try to keep an open mind when reading it, men are not the villain.
Yeah.
The men who do make it into the book, generally speaking, the specific men anyway, actually show up to be the hero, and they defy my expectations.
Hmm.
There's two poems, one right after
I'm
another.
sorry. I'm sorry. You said defy or define expectations.
Defy.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
They are, let me see if I can find them. Cuddle Blood and Sex While Spotting. The men,
Right.
two different men, but they defy my expectations and how they interact with me when I am menstruating. I
Hmm.
assume they're going to be disgusted by me. I assume they're going to freak out. And they
Hmm.
don't. They're like, okay, that's happening.
Right.
Do you want dinner? you know?
Well, the one that the one with the great title about, like the one you said, your now boyfriend,
Mhm.
like even that, you're saying the last couple of lines of that poem were like, even he, has this ignorance, but it's not a malice,
Yeah.
right?
And he definitely, every now and then when it comes up and we talk about it, he never means to be mean, he never means to be ignorant, he never means to like come across in a bad way. But it's like, and sometimes I realize that even you are a cis man TM
Yeah,
where you
yeah,
don't have this experience, and you know so you don't know how to talk about it, or you
yeah.
come across and you have the wrong information. But I think that's just part of being in a relationship with somebody where you inevitably, you each have your privileges.
Mm.
We're an interracial couple, so sometimes I come across as the white person TM,
Mm.
so you have to just manage that.
Right.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, so you talk about the TM, like, are you rich? You have the trademark on society and you have the trademark on you must be like, every time someone uses that, you get paid. Dang, you must be balling.
Oh yeah, I'm
If
just
only, right? If only you had those trademarks.
I am just the ballin' poet, because
Yeah,
we're such a wealthy group.
of course. Of course, of course. Well, that's really interesting. Obviously, myself included, there's so much ignorance, and
Mhm.
you take it from like the individual, like the speaker's personal experiences to
Mhm.
the, so from the micro to the macro, like I think
Mhm.
it's maybe the second to last poem or third to last is called They Vote Red.
Yes.
um and the ideas of like, the R party, right? And ideas of quote conforming rape, God's plan, and
Mhm.
talking about, wielding the cross like a dagger.
Yeah.
Where ignorance in the purest sense of the word can go to, willful ignorance and malice
Yeah.
and a complete sense of misogyny. So I just thought it was so interesting how you did, like I said, you did the big issues, the
Mhm.
larger societal, as well as how they come out, they play out in an individual's life.
Definitely. And actually, They Vote Red was not in the original manuscript. That was
Mm,
one of four that I added after it was accepted and after we were working on the final.
yeah.
I added, he read a science textbook once and figured that was good enough. They Vote Red, Patient Period, and Tsunami in the Employee Bathroom. Because I felt like those things were missing
Yeah.
when I was reading through. And I think it would be a very different book actually if They Vote Red wasn't in there.
Mm.
But I was really responding to, and this was before Roe v. Wade was turned over.
Oh wow.
This was about a year before, but I could kind of see it coming because they'd been talking about it. And also just conversations around abortion and, women's health and reproductive health. But it felt like I was so angry. So I wrote that and comes across.
Yeah.
But just how deadly these conversations can be, and
Mm.
how denying people autonomy and choice over their health, really fucks things up. You
Mm.
have women who are like now in prison, you have teenagers who now have children and who can't go to college now. And it really is setting back our society quite a ways, in ways that we don't even know yet. So I hope we can fix that soon. But
Yeah.
even then, there's so many lives now that have been destroyed by like not being able to take care of their health, and so many lives actually lost too.
Well, yeah, you talk about like the conforming of rape and like in
Mhm.
minimizing of, and it's like, obviously there's a lot about women's agency,
Yeah.
and you know without using any cheesiness, right? Like this really is a book that, like, a collection that, it makes a father look differently, at
Yeah.
being a father, makes,
Yeah.
the a partner. And I wonder how much of the book is aimed for women writers, men writers, no, doesn't
Yeah. So
matter, all the above.
Here's the thing. I wrote it to say my piece, and whoever read it would read it, because I
Mhm.
knew this was not the most traditionally marketable book. So that's actually why I submitted it to the prize, because I figured this is the only chance in hell this has of being a book. But I also thought it might not have a chance in hell because the final judge was a cis man. And I was like, I don't know if he's going to go with it,
Uh,
but I gave myself a terminal case of the fuckets and just submitted it anyway. And then we are.
uh-huh.
But I wrote it firstly for me. but then I was also writing, I was writing for other people who go through this, but interestingly enough, the people who respond to it the most are men, are cis men. Cis men really enjoy it. They feel like they've been, it's a sense of they've been let in on something
Yeah.
they didn't know before. And I think that's interesting. I'm like, we've been saying.
Right.
But I guess it's about like how honest you are and how visible you're making it. Because we'll say, and I think it comes down to, oh, we've been saying, but we've been saying to each other and not, you know, talking to men directly about it. But I did make a point, speaking of gender and sex, I did make a point to try to be trans inclusive in the book. Where when I talk about me, I use she, her pronouns because I am a cis woman. But when I talk about a greater menstruation community experience, I use period haver. And that was a deliberate choice in the book. I wanted to be inclusive because it's not that hard to be. There were a couple times where I caught myself, but that's because, you know, the conversation around menstruation is so gendered because we're like, women. Well, there are trans women who don't have periods and wish they did. And actually, I didn't think about that until when the book came out, and I mentioned, you know, I put on my Instagram like, hey, the book is out. And one of my, you know, my trans women friends reached out and she was like, I really can't wait to read it. I don't have these parts, but I wish I did. I wish this is something I went through. And that, you know, did give me a sense of gratitude for my body and that it does align with me. And I go through all the experiences and processes that align with myself. But a lot of fathers of daughters really in particular responded really well to the book, and they're really grateful to read it. And they were like, I felt a little uncomfortable. And I'm like, but you read it.
There you go.
But I think anytime you're expanding your horizons beyond your experience, and especially since I'm so raw and explicit, you know, it's going to be uncomfortable. But I think if you do the work to read it anyway, and you stick around and you're like, oh man, I was wrong about this, I think then you're doing some really good work.
Definitely. It was, I guess, kind of a two-part question. Like, was it cathartic for you? And then like with that, are you gonna have similar themes in future work? Are you gonna go a totally different route? Like, or still kind of deciding?
So it was very fun to write. I had just a great time.
So how long, you said it was like a lot of inspiration. Like, did you write it over like, I mean, I know you did touch ups here and there, but did you write it over like 3 weeks, like a month? Like,
it was about 6 months.
Yeah.
About 6 months.
Yeah.
Because I had the first 3 months where I was just kind of lightly writing it. And then at a Nervous Ghost open mic, when they were still video, Matt announced the prize. And I went, oh my God, this is the only chance this will ever have it being a book. And I was fortunately in a sense, I was still unemployed. So I had the writer's dream of nothing but time, and I could just focus on it.
Yeah.
You know? Which is why I shout out my parents at the end of the book, like, thanks for letting me rent free with you so I could write this. So it was great fun. You know, I got to kind of explore writing in a way I hadn't done before, as the nature of doing such a large project. You know, it's like 50 some poems about one theme, you know, which doesn't get done very often, at least for me. In terms of the next book, I'm almost done with the first draft. It has nothing to do with periods. We've moved on. I think I've exhausted the topic for myself. But that one's very different. But yeah, I'm about 3 poems away from having the first draft, and then I get to obsess over it and then send it to Matt.
Oh man.
And go, you want another one?
Yeah.
Like DJ Khaled, another one.
Yeah. DJ Khaled, if you're listening, put her,
We the best poets.
Keep going.
That's all I got.
Well, I want to thank you for your DJ Khaled references. I'm a big fan. I want to thank you for letting us get into the head about, about the subject matter, about what you're thinking about your writing process, about your early days and Frankenstein.
Yes.
And your TMs. And but yeah, I guess, thanks so much. It's so cool to hear from you yourself. And I know that it's like you said, it's a topic that is uncomfortable for a lot of people, but was such an interesting read, and educational comes off as like cheesy, but like educational and interesting, and has a lot to say, especially in 2022, about individuals and about all of us. So
Yeah.
long story short, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun. I've never done something like this before. So
Well, I hope
thanks
it's
for
the first.
having me.
I hope it's the first of many, and I look forward to hoping you meet you in real life, and continue to follow your career. Continue great luck with your work.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.